Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be making a memory game, and if you don't know what I mean by that, basically it's what I have running right here. This is what we'll be making. In the very end, you'll have a game where you click on one of these squares and an image shows up. You click another square, and you keep doing this until you find the pairs of two, right? So there are two of the same image hidden somewhere in this grid, and we have to find it. So here's the tamale, or whatever that is, the pepper. Let's see if we can find. There's a smoking sign. Okay, there's the spider, and there's the spider. I found that. There's the two golf things. Okay, I lucked into that, and there we go. Alright, and then at the very end, it says you matched all of the icons. Congratulations, you win. And it's over with. The program exits. So let's go ahead and start working on this. I've already got an empty form set up on Visual Studio. Let's go ahead and make the size of this form 550 by 550. That's what I used in the earlier example. And now we have a bigger form over here. And we're going to use a thing from the toolbox called a table layout panel. And that's what's going to give us that table of grids that we saw earlier. And each grid in the table will contain an image that we will assign to it. So let's find the table layout panel right here. And this table layout panel will give us a bunch of grids. Let's go ahead and double click that. So you can see now that there's already 4 little grids in this table, but we want to basically make this grid fill the entire form. So if we have it selected, make sure you have it clicked one time. Let's go back to the properties window, and over here there is a property called dock, and we're going to set that to fill. And basically how you do that is once you click this arrow, you get some buttons you can press, and we want to click this big one right here in the center because that's going to expand it to fill the entire form. See? If you look back now, that the 4 grids cover the entire form. The next thing I want to do is set the background color of the table layout panel to be blue. So here we have a property called back color. If you hit the arrow, you can go to the web option, and these are a bunch of different colors that are meant for the web, I suppose. And at the very bottom, you should find one called cornflower blue. I'm going to press that, and if you look back to the form, now the background color is this nice blue color. The last property we want to set is the cell border style, and this lets us change the appearance of the borders of each cell. So if we let's try inset, and you should see back over here on the form now the color of the border is kind of engraved in this white type of color. Let's go ahead and leave it like that, but feel free to play around with the different types of border styles if you want. Let's go back over here to the form view, and if you see this little arrow right here at the very top right, I'm going to press that, and this lets us do some more things with the table layout panel. I'm going to press edit rows and columns, and what I would like to do is add 2 more rows and 2 more columns into our table. Okay, so see right now we're in the columns view, but there's also the rows view. Let's go ahead and press add 2 times, and let's give each one of these columns 25% of the form, because we have 4 columns, so 25% times 4 is 100, and we want to fill up the entire form. Okay, so let's go here and say 25. On the new ones, we'll need to click percent instead of absolute, and here we'll say 25 and 25 again. Alright, now let's go to the row view, and we're going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to add 2 more rows, and then set the percent for everything to be 25% each. So 25, 25, 25. Okay, cool. I'm going to press OK. And now when you look back at our table, we have a 4x4 table here. Looks exactly like the example I showed you earlier. And now we need to actually add the images that will occupy each grid. So remember earlier we had the spider and the school bus, all that stuff. And actually what we're going to do for this is we're going to use the font Webdings, I think it's called. I'm going to open up the WordPad and show you what this looks like. Webdings should be, I'm actually just going to type it, Webdings. And then see, whenever I type like letters here, see, you get images instead of letters, okay? So we're going to kind of cheat here and use this font instead of using actual images, okay? So let's go back here, and if you remember from the previous stuff we've done, we can use a label from the toolbox to display text, okay? So we can change the font of the label to be Webdings to give us these images. So let's make sure that the table layout panel is selected. Make sure it's clicked one time. And then we're going to add a label to the table layout panel. So go to Toolbox and find your label. Double click. Let's go over to the Properties window and change some things. The first thing we want to do is make sure that our back color is cornflower blue. Mine has already been set to that. Yours should be too, but make sure that's correct. Let's set the auto size property to false. And basically this property will automatically resize your font. And we don't want that. We want everything to be just a fixed set size. Let's go ahead and change the dock property to fill, just like we did last time. And that's going to make the label fill the entire grid space. Down below there should be a property called text align. And we want the text to be centered in each grid. So let's make sure the property here is center, which is this middle button here. That gives you middle center. And last but not least, we need to change the font to Webdings. So let's go back up here where it says font, hit the plus sign, and here in the name, let's click the arrow and find Webdings. It should be at the very bottom here. Okay. I'm going to set the size of the font to 72 so it's nice and big and readable. And I'm also going to enable bold to true so it's nice and bold for us. And finally, we want to change the GDI char set to 2, and that's going to actually give us the correct character set for the Webding images to appear. So if you notice, whenever this is set to 0, it only gives us the text L over on the form, but as soon as we set it to 2, it gives us an image, okay? So let's go and actually change the text of this label to be a lowercase c, and the lowercase c gives us a square image from the Webdings font. So if you go back to form view over here, you should see this square that is centered inside of this grid. I'm going to click to make sure the label is selected, and then I'm going to press Control C, and then I'm going to paste this same label into each one of these boxes, okay, because we want each box or grid space to have an image. So I'm going to click this this empty grid here, press Control V, click this one, press Control V, right? Just keep repeating this process until you get all of them filled up. And now we're starting to get something that looks like that example from earlier. So now let's go into the code view of the form. I'm going to right-click form1.cs, say View Code. And we will need a few global variables here at the top. The first thing we need is an instance of random. We've used that a few times now in this series, so you should know how this works. Let's say random equals new random. And the next thing we need is a list of the icons that we want to use in our game. So remember in the example earlier, we had 2 spiders, 2 school buses. We need to actually decide what images we want to use and then assign them randomly to each grid, okay? So we need a list of the images that we want to use in our game. So let's use a list for that. Let's say list string icons equals new list. And then there's a little trick here. If you press enter and then use two curly brackets, kind of like how we do in functions, we can go ahead and set some values inside of this list instead of calling add a whole bunch of times, okay? So I already have decided what images I would like to use in our game. So I'm going to go ahead and type the letters that represent those images, okay? So this is where we're getting like the spiders and the school bus and all that, okay? Is because I have decided to use those here. Oops. So I'm going to say quotation mark, exclamation mark, comma, exclamation mark, and then we want quotation mark, capital N, capital N, we want 2 commas, 2 Ks, comma, 2 Bs, 2 Vs, 2 Ws, oops, and finally 2 Zs. Okay, so if you decide later on that you don't like the images that are showing up in this game, you can experiment with the Webdings font and find an image that coordinates to a letter that you like, and you can replace them here. The only thing is you need to make sure there's 2 of whatever you select, right? Because we're matching pairs of 2, so the game can't be 1 if there's not 2 of the same thing. Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, slight typo. No comma at the end, and then we end this with a semicolon on this last bracket here. We need 2 more variables, and then we should have all of the global variables that we need. So if you remember back to when I was playing the game earlier, I would click one image, and that image would stay up, and then as soon as I would click the second image, both images would stay up for a second, and then either stay up if they were the same image, or go away if they were not the same image. So we need a way to actually remember what the first image was that we clicked, because later on we'll want to compare that image with the second image, okay? So basically, just for the sake of remembering what's been clicked, we need to store the first image that we've clicked and the second image that we've clicked. So let's just say label, because all of the images are labels of text. First clicked, second clicked. And that's pretty self-explanatory. That's just storing the first thing we've clicked and the second thing we've clicked. Now we need to assign randomly these images to each label that's on our table. So let's go down here and write a new function called assign icons to squares. And it's self-explanatory. We're going to randomly assign the icons to the squares. First, let's make some local variables. We'll make a label. We will just use this to store whatever label we're currently looking at, so we have easy access to it. And then we will make an integer called random number. And this will be the random index into our list we wrote earlier. So whatever random number is set to is the random image that we're going to assign to this label we're looking at. And I'm going to say for int I equals 0, for as long as I is less than table layout panel 1 dot controls dot count I++. And what this is doing is we are iterating through every single control that is inside of our table layout panel. And we know that the only controls that are in our table layout panel are those labels, okay? So we're basically just iterating through every label that's on the grid. So let's say if table layout panel 1 dot controls at sub I, so whatever control that we're looking at right now, if that control is a label, let's go ahead and store it into our label variable. And I'm going ahead and making a check here because it's possible maybe you guys want to expand the game later and add different controls on it or something. So it's always good to kind of error check for things like this so your game doesn't crash in the future. Let's say label equals label table layout panel 1 dot controls I. So we are just casting the current control into a label because all labels are controls. So we're just converting it so we have access to all of the things inside label. Else, if it is not a label, we're going to say continue. And what that does is basically we're continuing on to the next thing in the loop. It'll just immediately take us to the top here and say I++. So we won't execute any further logic. Now let's pick a random icon to assign to our label. Let's say random number equals random.next. And we want to pick something that's between 0 and however many icons are in our list. So we'll just say icons.count. Okay. And then next we'll set the text of our label to be icons at random number. So basically whatever we picked here for the random number, that's our index into the icons list we wrote earlier. And now there's one final thing we need to do. It's possible that we get the same random number more than once. And we don't want that, right? We want to use everything that's in our list. So the way we can do this is by removing the random number from our list, okay? And since we're only running this game one time, we don't have to restart the game or anything like that. We can just say icons.remove at random number. Okay? So we choose a random number. We use that random number to choose a random icon in our list. We set the text of this label to that icon. And then we remove the random number from our icon list. Okay, so at the very end of this function, there will be nothing left in that icons list we wrote earlier because we will have taken everything out of it and thrown it into our grid. Okay, let's go back up here to the form1 constructor. And this is called whenever the game is initially started up. So as soon as the game has started up, we want to immediately assign our icons to squares. So we'll just call that function we just wrote. And let's go ahead and press F5 and see what this does. We should see something, I think. Okay, yep, there it is. We can see that a bunch of random images have been assigned to our labels. These are the same images that you guys saw in the example that I ran earlier. Feel free at this point, if you don't like any of these images, to experiment. You can type in different letters in our icons list and see if there's better stuff that you like. But for me, that's good enough. I'm going to go ahead and exit out. So now, if you remember back to the example that we did, all of the images started up invisible. You couldn't see any of the images until you actually clicked on them. But when we started up the program just now, notice that everything is being drawn to the screen and we can see it. So we're going to do a little bit of a trick to make them invisible. We're basically going to set the text color of each label to be the same color as the background. So technically the text is drawing, but because it's drawing the same blue color as the background, you won't be able to see it. So let's go back to our Form1 design view, and I'm going to click and hold Control while I click all of these labels so that they're all highlighted. And we'll just change the text color of all of them at once. All right. Over here we have the property ForColor. Right now it's set to control text, but we'll hit the arrow there and we'll find cornflower blue towards the bottom. Yep, right there. Alright, and then now you can see that everything is invisible, sorta, right? We can't see it anymore, but that's what we want. So now we need a way to actually run some code whenever we click one of these labels. So basically, you know, whenever we click an empty box, we want to either show whatever's behind it if it's the first thing we've clicked, or if it's the second thing we've clicked, we'll want to show it and then check to see if the two images we've clicked have matched. So just like before, we'll need a click event. So assuming that you still have all of these selected, I do, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the Events tab, and here in this click text box here, I'm going to call this function label underscore click, and then just press enter, and that will generate this function. There it is here. So the first thing we want to do is convert the sender object into a label. So I'm going to show you guys a new keyword here to do that. And let's say label clicked label equals sender as label. And basically what this is doing is the as keyword is trying to convert the sender into a label. But if it cannot do that, clicked label will just be null. Okay? So it's basically doing the same thing as this line down here. Okay? It's just a little more cleaner and convenient. And actually, this is a preference. You can code it with as or the other way down here. I'm just trying to show you guys multiple ways to do things so you can decide for yourself. If clicked label equals null, we will go ahead and return from this function. We'll exit the function. And just like I said, if clicked label equals null, that means it's set to nothing, which means we could not convert it into a label. And let's think ahead a little bit. What should happen if the player clicks one of the icons that have already been clicked? So let's say that the icon has been clicked one time, it's drawing to the screen, we see it, and the user has clicked that same icon again. We want to basically exit this function and ignore it, okay? We need to check for that, otherwise we could potentially kind of cheat the game if we can just click the same icon 2 times and that counts as a match. You know what I mean? We don't want that. So let's say if clicked label dot forecolor equals color dot black, we're going to return. And remember that the forecolor is currently set to cornflower blue, the same as the background, and whenever we click one of the icons, we'll change the foreground color to be black. So if what we clicked has a foreground color of black, we know that we have already clicked it, and we can just return. Otherwise, if we get to this part of the code, we need to check to see if we have clicked our first icon in that matching pair. Okay, basically at this point we're saying, is this the first icon that we've clicked, or is it the second icon that we've clicked? Okay, so let's say if first clicked equals null, that means we have never clicked anything for the first time. This was the first icon that we have clicked. Oops. Okay, so if it's null, the first thing we want to do is say first clicked equals clicked label. We'll assign, we'll basically store whatever we just clicked into this variable. And like I just described earlier, we'll set the foreground color of this label to be black. That way we can actually see what we've pressed. Okay? And finally, we will return from this function because that's all we need to do at this point. So if we press F5 and try and run the program, we should be able to start clicking on blank grids and see one thing appear. We haven't written the code yet for the second icon that we click, but we should be able to at least click one thing. Yep. Okay, and yeah, I can't click anything else. So we've clicked this one right here. The draw color turns to black so we can see it, and then nothing else happens. So back to this function here. If first clicked is not equal to null, we will not return from the function, right? None of this code will be executed. So we'll continue on in the function. And at this point, we know for sure that this is the second thing that we've clicked, right? So let's just go ahead, and we don't have to do an if statement. We can just say second clicked equals clicked label. Oops. And then, just like before, we'll say second clicked dot forecolor equals color dot black. So let's press F5 and see if we can click two things this time. Yep, we can. Oh, oops, now. Oh, look what's happening. Yeah, I see what's happening. Alright, so basically we can click more than one thing now, but no other logic has been implemented. What should happen is we press two of these grids, and then after a split second, you know, we want to have some time where the icons are still up so we can see what we've clicked. But then if they're not the same icon, they should disappear. Otherwise, if they are the same icon, they'll stay up. That's what needs to happen. Right now it's just not doing anything and letting us kind of overwrite the second clicked variable with whatever else we press. So let's exit out here. And remember what I just said about if we click two of the icons, we need to do one of two things. We need to either show both of the icons for a second so the user can see what's been pressed and kind of remember them, or if they're the same icons, we can just leave them up and continue on with the program. Okay, so let's take care of that first case first. If we press two icons that are not matching, we want to leave them up on the screen for a second and then set them back to the cornflower blue color so they're invisible. So to do that, we can use a tool called a timer. And timers are basically just something you imagine like a stopwatch or something. You start the timer, and then after a certain amount of time, an event will be triggered, and that event can basically let us call some code. Okay, and that's exactly what we want to do. We want to start a timer, and after a second or so, the event will be triggered when the timer is up, and with that event, we can do some code that basically resets all of the variables, makes everything invisible again to continue the game. Okay, so let's go to the design view, to the toolbox, and double click the timer tool. And you should see the timer. You can't really visualize the timer, but it's here. See it down here? Click that once to be sure it's selected. And if you look over here at the properties window, we have just a few properties we can change. Here we have the interval property, and this is the frequency of elapsed events in milliseconds. So right now, every tick is 100 milliseconds. We'll set this to 750 milliseconds. So every 750 milliseconds, this event over here, called the tick event, will be called. So let's go ahead and actually do something with this tick event. Okay, double click that. We'll get this function generated over here. Before we do anything in this function, we should go ahead and start the timer up here in our label click function. So after the second clicked variable gets set, we'll just say timer1.start. So we're starting the timer, and then after that 750 milliseconds, the tick event will be called, and then this function will be entered down here, timer1 tick. And at this point, we can stop the timer. We'll say timer1.stop, because we only want to tick it one time, if that makes sense. Okay, well, we just need the timer to do the 750. We'll reset the variables, and then we don't care about it anymore until more things are clicked. Okay, so we need to set both of the things we've clicked to be cornflower blue again, so they're invisible. So let's say first clicked dot forecolor equals first clicked dot backcolor. And the back color is the cornflower blue background that's in our table. Let's do the same thing for second clicked. Second clicked forecolor equals second clicked back color. So we've set both things to cornflower blue, and now we just need to forget about these variables. So we'll just set first clicked to null and second clicked to null, because now we're starting a new round where the player can click and try to match two new icons. So let's go back up here for a second and do a quick error check. It's possible that the user can press more than two icons during this timer phase. So what I mean by that is after you click the two icons, there's that 550 millisecond wait time. It's possible that the user can kind of sneak in a third icon during that time, and then three things will be displayed, and then all of the logic gets messed up. So we can easily check for that and exit this function immediately if we've already clicked two things. So let's just say if first clicked is not equal to null and second clicked is not equal to null, we'll return immediately. Okay, let's go ahead and press F5 and see if it works. Click, click, goes away. Alright, so see how there's that brief second where the two things stay up and then they go back down? Yep. And see, I'm also not able to click three times, so that's good. Okay. The only thing now is that if we actually match two of the icons, we don't actually have any logic to do anything with that. So I think the two chili peppers or whatever were... Okay, now I'm not going to be able to do it. I was going to try and make them match so I could show you that, but I'm doing really bad. Oh, okay, here's 2 spiders. There we go. So see, they both still went away. Okay, so now we need to take care of that other case where we leave them up if they're matching. So exit out, and we're just going to do a basic if check down here. We're going to say if first clicked dot text equals second clicked dot text. If that happens, we'll set everything to null. So we'll say first clicked equals null, second clicked equals null. Else, if the text is not equal, we'll do the timer start, and when the timer is up, we'll clear the 2 icons. So at this point, basically what this does is it just clears out the variables, it leaves the text as black, and lets us continue playing the game. So let's go ahead and press F5 and see if we can win the game. Oh wow, I looked out there. Okay. Alright, so I've matched everything, but remember earlier in the very first example I showed you, there was a message box that came up and said, hey, you win, and then exits the game. We need to actually check to see if everything has been matched so we can kind of detect that the player has won. Okay? So let's exit out, and I'm going to go down here and write a new function called check for winner. Okay, semicolon or curly brackets. And basically this is really easy to do. So think about how we would detect to see if this game has been won. We could get really complicated and see if the number of matches is equal to what we had in the list, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. We can just basically check to see if everything is drawing black. Right? We know we've won if there's no invisible icons left on the screen. So we're making this super easy for ourselves by approaching it like this. So all we need to do is iterate through all of the controls on the table, just like last time. So we'll say for int I equals 0. If I is less than the table layout panel 1, controls dot count. We'll I++. And then we'll make a local variable up here called label. We'll use this to store whatever label we're currently looking at. And let's use the trick we've just learned with the as keyword. Let's say label equals table layout panel 1 dot controls at sub I. So we want to convert the current control that we're looking at as a label. Alright. If label is not equal to null and the label dot forecolor is equal to the label dot backcolor, we will return. So basically we're going through all of the labels. If we're looking at a label that's valid, it's not equal to null. And if the valid label that we're looking at has the same foreground color as the back color, that means, remember the background color is always cornflower blue. That means that this label is currently invisible and has not been correctly matched. So we can return from this function and not do anything else. However, if we run through this entire for loop and never find anything that has a cornflower blue foreground color, we can continue with this function and do one final thing down here. We will say messagebox.show. You matched all the icons. Congrats. Yeah, we'll just you can put whatever you want here. It doesn't matter, but just something exciting. And then we will let's just go ahead and exit the program. So we'll say close. It's a function that you call, and that will close the form for us. And that should be it, except that we need to actually call this function. So let's go up here. And after we detect what the second clicked icon is, we have set both of these variables and we can actually do something with them. So the first thing we want to do is check for the winner. And remember that if we do win the game, the program will exit, so nothing else will be executed. But if we return from this function, that means we have not won the game, and then we can continue on with the rest of the code here. So I think this should be it. Let's press F5 and see if see if I can win this game one more time. All right. School bus. Bike spider. Bike. I just saw that one. Where was it? Now I'm getting messed up. I was doing really good at the beginning, and then I kind of messed up there towards the end. I was trying to speed run this and see if you guys could beat me, but whatever. I won. All the icons have been matched. I'm going to press OK, and the program exits. So that's it, guys. Good job. That's actually, I kind of enjoy matching games like that. I know it's kind of a simple game, but I enjoy it. I think it's fun. So hopefully you guys like playing your memory game there. And I will see you guys on the next episode.